All right, Chapter 12 starts on page 335. As you can see, it's how to use Ajax, Json, and Flickr. I'm not doing this justice, just so you know. In fall of next year, when you guys are taking the class that's going to be changed, the AWD1000 class, you're going to be going over a lot of this stuff, just so you know. A lot of the stuff that's at the end of the book, like this chapter, is the kind of stuff that class is about. Now, I don't know if you've ever done this or not. They changed their website, but I just wanted to show you something. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. If I have already, sorry. This used to be the perfect site to show things to people, Family Video. Because what they had on Family Video when you went out there is if you took your mouse and you put it over one of these movies, a little bubble would come up and it would show you what the movie was about. Have you ever seen that kind of thing where something comes up on the screen, you move off? That's Ajax. With Ajax, what you get is what's called a partial page refresh. It doesn't redraw the whole page. It only needs to redraw what it needs to redraw. Now, and I believe you both get it, but again, if I go in here and I just go into Google, and let's say that I want to find out about JavaScript. All right, so I come in here with a J. Well, this is called Google search, right? And you can already see what it's done here. Now, as soon as I put an A in, you see how it changes every time? But hopefully you agree with this. I'm going to put a V in here now and watch over here and over here and up here and down here. That doesn't change, correct? So the only part of the screen that refreshes itself is the part that has to be refreshed. All right? It used to be that you couldn't do this. In other words, anytime that you wanted to go and refresh the page, you had to refresh the entire page. All right? So we'll talk about that. Talk a little bit about the different Ajax methods that you can use. And then talk about using Ajax with a product that's called Flickr. All right. So, believe it or not, I've kind of just shown you what Ajax is and what it's about. All right. So there's normal and there's Ajax in the middle. And you go, wait a minute, they're the same. No. Rather than an HTTP request, it's an XML HTTP request. So it's saying you only have to redraw this little part of the screen. And that's what it does. All right, so as it says, Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It lets you receive data from a web server without reloading the entire page, also known as a partial page refresh. All right, JavaScript is essential because it says JavaScript not only sends the request, but processes and updates the DOM with the new data. To send an Ajax request, JavaScript uses a browser object known as an XML HTTP request object. There actually was a famous paper written on this probably 20 years ago now. All right, and it's funny, this is one of the few times during the semester, so you can write it down if you want, and I'm actually going to praise Microsoft. All right, they're the ones who came up with this XML HTTP request, and they originally figured out how to make this work for a partial page refresh. So as it says, today websites like Blogger, YouTube, Twitter, and Flickr provide APIs that let you use Ajax to get data from sites. You're going to have to, as time goes on, understand this term, an API or an application programming interface. Okay? Let's suppose that it's a year from May. So it's May 2021. You both graduated, and just looking your way. So Keegan, you go out and you apply for a job. You blow them away in the interview, and they're like, we want to hire you. Okay? It's not inconceivable, correct? They might offer you a contract. And in that contract it says, we will pay you this amount of money, and you will agree to do this job. Does that make sense? That's what an API is. It's an agreement between you and the software, where the software says, I will provide this functionality for you. give you this function, etc. And you say, fine, I'll make sure when I call it in the correct way. That's what it is. All right. All right, so common data formats for Ajax. XML we sort of looked at in the past a little bit. Again, the idea with XML is you make your own tags. So notice management, team members, etc. Now, when you look at this, this probably means almost nothing to you. All right, but JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. The last chapter that we'll cover in here next week, not chapter 18, that's the last one in the book, we skipped that. Chapter 17 is on object-oriented JavaScript that uses JSON a lot. All right. So it says the common data formats are HTML, which you know already, XML, and JSON. JSON is the most popular format for Ajax applications. Typically, it's a lot easier to read. This is the website, www.json.org. It's really ugly. All right, it's a functional website, but it's a really ugly website. Now that XML HTTP request object contains this stuff. All right, an abort method to cancel a request, get all response headers, get response header, open, send, etc. So you can see the stuff that's in here. So it says the table above shows the members that can be used with the request object. It would make no sense to say, well, I'm going to memorize those. No, but now at least if you ever need to go back and look at them, you know where you can go and find it. You can also go online and find the same information. So how do you use this type of object? Again, the idea is, if this is my web page, if you look on the screen here, if I click any one of these buttons, this area in here is going to change. Does that make sense? So for instance, we clicked on the Vector Corp management team and it comes up with Agnes. You might even set that up so it stays on the screen for a few seconds, then it disappears, and then something else pops in there. And you could do that now with jQuery and with animation. You know how to, I'm not saying you exactly know how to do that, but we've looked at stuff like that before. So as it says, the application that's here uses this XHR object to load all of the team members into a file and then show them one at a time. All right. So there are some jQuery shorthand methods you can use. Anytime you can use a shorthand, typically you want to because it involves less typing. Since it involves less typing, there's less of a chance you'll make a mistake typing. All right, so I'm not going to read these to you, but you can take a look at them in there. One of the things that we talked about earlier that I mentioned to you is that jQuery does not have a for loop, but if you want to loop through things, you can use what's called an each statement, which does the same kind of thing as a for loop. So when you look here, jQuery, as it says, includes several shorthand methods. All of these let you include data that will be used by a web server and grab the information that you want. All right. It says get and post. Hopefully you remember this, what we talked about earlier. Get means that information is, God bless you, that information is passed right up in the query string, right up at the top of the page. Anybody can see it. It's for data that is not personal data. Post hides the data in what's called the HTTP header. All right. They show you in here how to use the load method. So again, the idea, it says it loads the elements when one of the links is clicked. All right. So we could click one of those and what would be in here would change. That all makes sense. So as they mentioned here, the load function can only load content. During testing, you'll be able to load files from the file system. It says in Firefox and Safari, but Chrome, IE, Edge, and Opera require all files to be on an actual web server. That may or may not be the case anymore because, again, this book is 3 years old. All right. how to use $.get and $.post to load data. It's just more of the same. It's just another way of doing it. So as it says, it works the same. All right. You can use the find method to get the data. Now, that's all fine and dandy. What the book that we had in the past, the old book that we had before this one, it actually showed an application that you could build. And the idea behind that was up on the screen, you had like a text box, okay? And in that text box, you could put down, there were two text boxes. One of them, you could put the name of a city, and one of them, you could put the name of a state, okay? So for instance, I could put in Wentzville, Missouri, and when I clicked the button, it would show me the weather forecast for that. Then I could change it after that, and I could put in Chicago, Illinois, click it, and boom, it would show me that forecast. So the box, or the information that was under those text boxes is what would change all the time. All right. All right. How to use the .get JSON method to load data. Again, the advantage of using JSON is it's more user-friendly to look at than XML is. All right, you can kind of tell team members, well, there's a name, there's a title, etc. So as the author says there, to process return JSON data, you can use an each method within an each method as an example. All right. You can also send data with these requests. Now, the idea behind this, with a lot of the stuff that's in this chapter, is let's say that you've got a form on the screen. You click the submit button. All right. So far, we haven't done anything when you click submit, other than maybe try to validate the form. But typically, when you click a submit button, it's sending information to a server. That's what this chapter is about. That's when and how you're going to manipulate that data. All right. There's the .ajax method. And as it says here, $.ajax, here's the stuff you can use with it. So notice if I make that nice and small, that's everything that you can use with it. It makes it hard to read, but it says it provides options that give you more control over the way Ajax requests work, so you're taking control. Notice this XHR becomes a JQXHR, which means jQuery XML header request, okay? You can also use something called JSON-P. As they mentioned, it's JSON with padding. So the idea is when you are loading information into a server or whatever, all right, you want some control over where it's loaded, how it's loaded, what it looks like, etc. Here's an example of an error because you went out to look for something, and as it says, the file wasn't found. All right. The last part of the chapter, starting on 358, the author says, to give you an idea of how all this works together, the chapter will show you how to use Ajax with the API for Flickr. It says the goal here is not so much to show you how to use Flickr, but rather how to use the API. Flickr is a website. Notice as it says, I don't know if either of you have ever used it, it allows you to store photos up in the cloud for free. The good news about that is you can store stuff for free. The bad news is, since it's free, other people may have access to your photos. All right, so it's like you wouldn't store personal photos there, but of maybe whatever. But you could put anything out there technically that you want to put out there. All right, so this is the kind of stuff that you typically could put out there. All right, as it says, it's a website that lets you store your photos on it for free, meaning you can access your photos from wherever you are. All right, and again, if you give people permission, so can anyone else. All right, it provides a number of feeds that you can retrieve photos and related information from. In this chapter, you'll learn how to retrieve photos from the public photos and video feed, which is the one you'd probably use the most often anyway. All right. there's just so much stuff to show you in here. Look at this. Data items returned by a photo feed. What it means is you have access to each one of these things. You can do as much or as little with them as you want. All right? So when you look at it, I'm not saying this makes any sense to you. All right? But what you notice is it says there we're using the get JSON. So the idea is the information that's returned will be in a more English-like method. All right? So when you look at this, this doesn't look very nice. My guess is I couldn't read that and tell you what most of it meant, so my guess is probably neither could you. All right? But that said, you may or may not have heard of programs like this, but there's a program called a web scraper that could go in and take a look at this information and just dig out the stuff you were looking for. So for instance, if it had in here the location of where certain pictures were, you could put that in and then you could key in that URL and boom, you'd see those pictures. So they come back and on the same thing here, what they're saying is, hey, rather than just showing the management team, it would be nice to show a picture of them too. So they put those pictures out there in the public domain so that you're able to do that. All right. You can even search based on pictures if you want to do that. And that's it. Granted, that wasn't very much. Okay, I get that. Next week, so starting next Monday, all right, Monday I'm going to go over Chapter 13. Tuesday I'm going to go over Chapter 14. Wednesday, Chapter 15. Thursday, Chapter 16. Friday, Chapter 17. In fact, I think we said that since Maya wouldn't be here on Monday, that Friday of this week I'd go over 13. All right, just so you're all here. Now, why? Who cares? All right. Chapter 13 is on how to work with numbers, strings, and dates. This chapter will help you a lot for the C# class next semester because the stuff is handled pretty much the same way. All right. Then I think it's like Chapter 14 is on arrays. Just there'll be some stuff you'll be introduced to. All right. I'm going to stop right there. Like I said, I can just feel my voice is going.